Ethan, would you suggest the Job Guide 360 guide for candidates getting ready for interviews?
Yes, without a doubt. It is well structured and makes preparation straightforward.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really cracking open the playbook for a super strategic, high-pressure role, the compensation manager at an early-stage startup.
And our source material, it's not some dry HR manual. Think of it more like a blueprint, built from the toughest interview questions they face.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's much more about survival strategy than just, payroll. When you really look at these questions, you see compensation is how startups juggle, three huge things at once. Financial risk, their actual runway, how long they can keep the lights on, and crucially, getting and keeping the key people who make or break the company.
Right. And we all know that core tension. How do you bring in that top-tier talent, especially for those like critical engineering roles or leadership spots, without just absolutely burning through your limited cash? So our mission today, let's get past the basics. Let's unpack the really tough trade-offs, the financial levers they pull, the specific methods you need to build a reward system that works. It's got to be competitive, feel fair, and maybe most importantly, be fiscally responsible. And often you're building this whole thing from zero.
Okay, so let's start right there at the foundation. Before you even think about a salary number, you need principles. It kicks off with the compensation philosophy, right?
Yeah.
How does a startup even begin thinking about the why behind pay?
The philosophy, it has to be super focused, anchored in the company values, sure, but also what the talent market actually demands. And the big one, the non-negotiable, capital efficiency. If your philosophy isn't obsessed with saving cash early on, frankly, you won't be around long enough for it to matter.
Okay, and the source gives a really specific, kind of actionable way to do this. Can you walk us through that strategic split they suggest?
Yeah, the smart play seems to be targeting the 50th percentile for cash comp. So right in the middle of the market. That keeps your cash burn predictable, manageable. But, and this is the key bit, to still land those crucial high-demand people, you lean heavily on the equity mix. Aiming higher there, like 65th, maybe even 75th percentile in total comp for those really key roles.
I get the financial logic. But let me push back a bit, play devil's advocate. If you're only offering 50th percentile cash, aren't you immediately losing, say, the top 5% engineers, ones getting 75th percentile cash offers elsewhere? How do you actually quantify that risk, that those critical people just won't even talk to you?
That's exactly the trade-off. Leadership has to buy into that, accept it, and then figure out how to mitigate it, usually through really good communication about the equity's potential value. The philosophy is basically a hedge. You're trading today's cash for tomorrow's potential upside. The equity stake, high risk, sure, but startups need people who are mission-driven, okay with that risk, who see the long game. The philosophy has to attract that specific profile.
And startups change so fast. Funding rounds, pivots. So the philosophy can't just be set in stone, right?
Absolutely not. You have to revisit it, maybe even overhaul it after every single funding event ABC rounds. Or, if the whole business strategy takes a sharp turn, your pay approach has to keep pace with your finances and your talent needs.
Okay, moving from the why, the philosophy, to the how. You mentioned job architecture. If you're starting totally from scratch, what's the right sequence? How do you build something that can actually scale up past, say, 50 people without breaking?
You need that structure right away. Seriously, delay it and you just get chaos. Title inflation everywhere. The process. Start with a full audit. What roles do we actually have? Second, consolidate titles. Get rid of those unique, confusing ones nobody outside understands. Third, bring in a simple leveling framework.
A level framework, like wow.
Keep it super simple at first. The source suggests maybe just a 6-level framework, and you tie each level clearly to specific competencies. What does someone at level 3 need to be able to do? This shifts things away from one-off negotiations towards more standardized pay bands.
And this sounds kind of tedious, maybe, but does structuring things like this actually pay off? Measurably?
Oh, absolutely. That structure becomes your single source of truth for hiring. The source detailed a specific case where putting in this simple architecture cut their time to offer metric by 30%.
Wow, 30%?
Yeah. Because when recruiters or managers know exactly what band and level someone fits into, the whole negotiation process just shrinks dramatically.
Okay, before we leave the foundation, the modern challenge, remote work. If you're hiring nationally, maybe even globally, how do you decide pay? One single rate for the job? Or do you start tiering pay based on where someone lives, the local cost of labor?
The big culture versus cost debate. It really boils down to two main paths. Path 1, a single national rate. Simpler, feels more unified culturally maybe. Everyone gets paid for the job's value, not their address. Path 2, tiered geo-differentials, maybe 2 or 3 tiers. This is purely about cost alignment, paying less where labor costs less.
And whichever way they go, they can't just spring it on people. Transparency is huge here, isn't it?
Totally. Leadership has to get out ahead of it. Socialize the why behind the decision before it rolls out. If you pick the single rate, explain why the person in, say, Omaha is making more than their local market. If you go tiered, explain why the person in NYC makes more than the exact same role in Tampa. And it has to be baked into everything: ranges, job posts, relocation policies to maintain trust or try to build it.
All right, now let's get into the really high-stakes stuff, equity. We said it's the main currency for attracting that top talent early on. So how do you design the equity strategy? It's more than just handing out stock.
Way more. You have to ground it in the financials first. Need 3 key things: the latest 409A evaluation, how big your current option pool is, and your hiring forecast for the next, say, 18-24 months.
Let's just pause on 409A for a sec. That's crucial. Maybe not everyone knows it.
Good point. Yeah, the 409A is basically the fair market value of the company's common stock. An independent appraisal sets it. And since stock options have a strike price, the price employees pay to buy the stock, later that 409A value is what legally anchors everything. It sets the minimum strike price.
Got it. So you have the fair market value. What metric do you watch to make sure you're not giving away too much of the company too fast?
Dilution, right?
Exactly. Dilution. You have to model your desired equity burn rate. How much equity are you using up each year? The source mentions 2% to 3% annual dilution is pretty common for startups trying to balance growth with protecting ownership for founders, investors. Burn faster than that, you'll need to raise more cash just to refill the pool or face painful dilution down the line.
And the type of grant itself. Options versus RSUs, restricted stock units. When do you use which? Generally, early-stage companies think pre-IPO, usually up through maybe Series B funding. They leaned heavily towards options. Options have more risk for the employee, yeah. They have to actually buy the stock later, but they save the company cash now. Plus, potentially better tax treatment for founders. Then, as the company matures, valuation risk drops. Usually post-Series C is the time. That's when you might strategically pivot towards RSUs. They usually have value right when they vest.
But whether it's options or RSUs, if people don't understand what they have, the value is lost, isn't it?
Totally lost. Your strategy absolutely has to include clear, plain language education, like visual tools, simple glossaries explaining vesting, strike price, the risks involved. Only then can people really compare total comp offers fairly, instead of just relying on fuzzy promises about a future IPO.
Okay, let's shift to the data headache. Startups rely on surveys, Radford, Mercer, Option Impact, Carta, Pave, tons of them. But what do you do when they disagree? Like one says a senior engineer band is X, another says X plus $15,000. How do you handle that conflict rigorously?
Right. This is where the comp manager has to be more like a detective than just a data monkey. You can't just average them. That's lazy and wrong. The smart solution is to triangulate.
Triangulate. Okay. What does that actually involve? Step by step.
First, prioritize the survey data based on how well it matches your specific job scope and level. If Survey A's principal engineer looks different from Survey B's, you weigh the better match more heavily, or maybe discard the bad one. Second, slice the data multiple ways. Check the cuts by company size, funding stage, geography. You might find one survey is skewed by late-stage companies, making it look artificially high for you. Third, and this is absolutely crucial for defending your choices, you document your rationale. Write down why you weighted certain data points or sources more than others. That documentation protects you when finance, inevitably, asks why the pay bands are set where they are.
Makes sense. Defensible. Okay, let's pivot to operational reality. Tight budgets, compliance headaches. Take the really painful scenario, tiny merit budget, maybe 2% for everyone, but your analysis shows 15% of your best people are way below market rate. How do you even run a fair pay cycle with so little money?
You absolutely cannot do across-the-board raises with 2%. It's just not possible. So you have to shift to highly targeted prioritization. Segment your people based on 2 things. How critical are they to the business, and what's their retention risk?
So data drives where the scarce dollars go. How do you pinpoint the folks who are really lagging the market?
You run a comp ratio analysis. Simple concept. Employee salary divided by the midpoint of their pay band. If someone's a top performer but their comp ratio is, say, 0.85, meaning they're 15% below the midpoint, they shoot to the top of the priority list for a market adjustment. You focus that limited 2% budget on those high criticality, low comp ratio employees, knowing others, unfortunately, have to wait.
Which means managers have to deliver some really tough news, telling valuable people they aren't getting a market fix this time around.
Exactly, and you have to equip managers for that. They need holes. First, calibration tools, let them model different budget scenarios for their team, see the impact. Second, they need professional, vetted talking points for those hard conversations. Explain the why. Tie it back to the philosophy, internal equity, without making the manager sound defensive or like they're making excuses.
Speaking of rigor, compliance is just huge now. Pay transparency laws, California, New York, Colorado, more coming. How does a startup manage that? Posting salary ranges without messing up internal equity, or worse, getting sued?
It has to be proactive. Build compliance into the process, don't tack it on later. 3 essential steps. 1, align your posted ranges and job ads directly with your approved internal pay bands. No games. 2, set crystal clear guardrails for recruiters on offer flexibility, non-negotiable ones. And 3, run regular internal audits, maybe quarterly. Check that the actual offers being made and accepted fall within the ranges you advertised.
That audit piece sounds key. Because if all your offers end up at the very top of your posted range, even if the range itself is compliant, it probably means your internal band is too low, right? And you're creating internal compression issues.
Precisely. It's a warning sign. Now, let's think worst case crisis. Major pivot in strategy, or maybe a funding round gets delayed. Company slams the brakes on hiring for 2 quarters. How does the comp strategy shift under that kind of immediate pressure? Agility is everything then. The comp manager has to react fast. Immediate moves. Freeze any planned range increases. Freeze hiring premiums. You cannot afford to add costs during a cash crunch. Then you strategically redirect any available limited funds away from growth hiring towards retention risk. Focus laser-like on those key employees who are absolutely critical for survival, the ones who might bolt if morale dips.
So the whole focus flips from attracting talent to just holding on to the core team. Communication must be paramount then.
Oh, critical. The source really stresses structured, calm communication. Get a concise FAQ out immediately. Give managers clear, factual talking points about what's happening and why, and then monitor key metrics constantly, month by month, especially attrition rates, pipeline health. If you see regrettable attrition, key people leaving spiking among those below market, you know your retention plan isn't cutting it. You might need emergency funds.
Which brings us nicely to program health. With all this change and pressure, what are the absolute must-track metrics, the dashboard essentials?
Keep it short, powerful, focused on predicting problems. First, compa ratio distribution. Where are people sitting within your bands? Are they clustered low? Second, offer acceptance rates versus where the offer falls in the band. If everyone only accepts at the top 90th percentile, your bands are probably too low, non-competitive. Third, that regrettable attrition by market gap. Are your critical, underpaid people leaving? That's a huge red flag. Proof your strategy failed them. And fourth, always watch the equity burn rate and pool runway. Do you have enough equity left for future hires you've planned?
Okay, last piece. Culture and communication. We talked about structured transparency. Clear about the system, not individual pay. How do you walk that line effectively without making people feel like things are hidden, fueling rumors?
Structured transparency means you're open about the how and why. The philosophy, the ranges for roles, how promotion and merit work, but you protect individual pay privacy. The absolute key to making this work, the manager. You have to invest heavily in training them, role-playing difficult conversations, giving them clear glossaries. If the manager can explain the system clearly and confidently, the employee is much more likely to trust the system, even if they aren't thrilled with their personal outcome right now.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The strategic foundations, the equity lever, wrestling with messy data, navigating tight budgets, compliance.
Yeah, and if you zoom out all this super detailed comp work, it really comes down to one core skill. Influence. Influencing skeptical stakeholders, especially finance, executives. You can't just ask for more budget. You have to justify it with data-driven storytelling, sophisticated scenario modeling. Like model the predicted drop in vacancy days if you raise the cash target for engineers, or the reduction in costly, regrettable attrition. That's how you get buy-in for what might seem like just higher costs up front.
That completely reframes the role, doesn't it? It's persuasion influence, backed by hard numbers. We also touched on managing those inevitable issues, like title inflation, tightening promotion rules, using recognition bonuses strategically as a bridge. So this whole blueprint, it leads us to the final kind of provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. When you're building one of these complex systems balancing finance, fairness, perception, all under intense pressure, what's ultimately your most powerful lever? Is it the cash, the equity potential, or is it something else? Maybe it's simply the ability to communicate a really tough decision using clear, rigorous, documented data.
Definitely something to mull over as you build your own systems or manage expectations for your own key talent.
Indeed. We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.